Prime Minister has been given a standing ovation at the Garma Festival in Northeast Arnhem Land after delivering a passionate speech. Anthony Albanese later told Sky News he was confident Australians would support the proposal for an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice enshrined in the Constitution.
Under an Arnhem Land sun, the weight of expectation hung heavy on the Australian Prime Minister. On a stage overlooking the Gulkula escarpment, Anthony Albanese delivered a speech some described as the most significant in Indigenous affairs since Kevin Rudd's apology to the stolen generation.
The Uluru Statement is a hand outstretched, a moving show of faith in Australian decency and Australian fairness from people who have been given every reason to forsake their hope in both.
Watched on by Aboriginal elders, business leaders and the US ambassador, the Prime Minister revealed the question the government will put to Australians at a referendum into the constitutional recognition of Indigenous people.
We should consider asking our fellow Australians something as simple but something as clear as this. Do you support an alteration to the Constitution that establishes an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice? A straightforward proposition, a simple principle, a question from the heart.
It's a question that's already prompted another.
Do you think you'll win the support of the Australian public now?
Well, my speech speaks for itself, so I'm hoping to get the support. This is an important moment for the Australian people, and I'm very confident that the Australian people will demonstrate the generosity that they demonstrate every day when they care about fairness. And that's what this is about, fairness and respect.
Despite the Prime Minister's optimism, some remain sceptical about the proposal.
Given we're talking about the Constitution, it's really important that Australians understand what it is that is being proposed by the Voice, so who will serve on it, how they'll be chosen, what it will do, and how will it affect people in Indigenous communities in a positive way to address some of the issues in those communities.
In 1988, former Prime Minister Bob Hawke delivered the Barunga Statement to Galarrwuy Yunupingu, promising a treaty. The Gumatj clan leader welcomed Mr Albanese's commitment, but his brother Jawa delivered a reminder about the scars of the past.
And then in recent times, there have been many promises made to my people. And it has hurt us a lot.
Others noticed the absence of a Makarrata or truth-telling commission in the Prime Minister's commitment and want the government to follow through on Bob Hawke's promise of a treaty.
We have been promised treaty in the past, but as the Yoti in the band sang, like writing in the sand, that promise disappeared.
Garma began as a small festival celebrating Australia's rich Indigenous culture over more than 2 decades. It's also become a forum for serious political discussion about Indigenous affairs. Anthony Albanese is the first Prime Minister to attend the Garma Festival since Malcolm Turnbull in 2017. He'll be hoping that one day he can return here and celebrate what would be one of the most significant developments in Aboriginal affairs in this country since 1967.
I am determined for us to succeed in this great project, and working together with humility, with hope, I am absolutely sure that we can. Thank you very much.
The Prime Minister received a standing ovation, but his next test will come against a much tougher crowd. Australians have passed just 8 of 44 referenda since Federation. Matt Cunningham, Sky News, Northeast Arnhem Land.
The Prime Minister has revealed the question the government will put to the Australian people as part of a referendum into constitutional recognition for Indigenous people. But will the coalition support the move? Matt Cunningham spoke to the Shadow Indigenous Affairs, Julian Lesser.
Julian, we've seen the Prime Minister outline what the government wants the question to be that will be put to the Australian people as part of a referendum. Is this something the Coalition's going to support?
Well, we welcome the announcement today of the government's proposed question and draft amendments to the Constitution. This is a positive step in the debate about constitutional recognition. Given we're talking about the Constitution, it's really important that Australians understand what it is that is being proposed by the Voice, so who will serve on it, how they'll be chosen, what it will do, and how will it affect people in Indigenous communities in a positive way to address some of the issues in those communities.
So we still don't have any of that detail. You'll need to see that detail from the government before you'll make a decision about whether you'll support this proposal?
I think Australians need to see that detail too. I mean, the government has just released some words for amendment to the Constitution. They've just released a proposed question, but that doesn't tell us what the Voice is going to do, how it'll be chosen, who's going to serve on it, and how it will address those important issues on the ground in communities.
The third sentence that they're proposing to amend the Constitution appears to give some leeway for the Parliament to be able to make changes to the Voice, you know, even after it's enshrined in the Constitution. Is that not sufficient to then be able to amend the Voice if it's not exactly working in the right way or not exactly what people want it to be?
I think people want to know what the government's proposal for the Voice is to start with, because that will help people understand what it is the government's proposing. People are asking reasonable questions about the composition of the Voice. They're asking reasonable questions about its powers. They're asking reasonable questions about how it will address some of those issues, whether it's domestic, family and sexual violence in remote communities, whether it's issues about employment and education on the ground that affect people in Indigenous communities. And so I think it's really important that the government, as the government, present its proposal for the Voice.
Well, Tom Calma and Marcia Langton did a body of work under the former coalition government about what the Voice would look like. Do we not have a model there from the work that they've done about what the Voice is going to be?
Well, the coalition committed $31.8 million to roll out the local and regional aspects of the Voice. We responded to the Calma-Langton report. The government hasn't responded to what it thinks about the Calma-Langton report's proposals about a national voice, and we think that they should respond to that, and they should outline how they think a national voice would work.
You raised some of those issues like domestic violence, sexual abuse, some of the safety issues we're seeing in communities. You recently spent some time in Alice Springs with Jacinta Price, the new Country Liberal Party senator. Can you just give us your impressions of what you saw on the ground there?
Because the new Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, I think it's really important that I get out on the ground and talk to Indigenous people in the community, and I was delighted to visit Alice Springs and Hermannsburg with Senator Jacinta Price and talk to people who are engaged in dealing with some of the issues around family, sexual and domestic violence in those communities. One of the things that really worries me is the wind back of alcohol restrictions as a result of the sunsetting of the Stronger Futures legislation. It beggars belief that the Northern Territory government has decided effectively, instead of keeping those restrictions in place and allowing people to opt out, in fact removing those restrictions and forcing people to opt back in, because we know that alcoholism leads to domestic and family violence, and that makes people in those communities much less safe.
It appears the Northern Territory government doesn't want to budge on this issue, but some Labor federal politicians have been quite vocal in their opposition to it. Marion Scrimgeour raised the issue in her maiden speech in the federal parliament this week. Linda Burney, the Minister for Indigenous Australians, also from reports has concerns. Have you had any discussions with your federal colleagues, even on the Labor side of the fence, about this issue and whether they can put some pressure on the Northern Territory government to undo this?
I've been raising this issue since I became aware of the sunsetting of the Stronger Futures legislation. I know Jacinta Price has raised it as well, and I've expressed my concerns to the Minister and to colleagues about the importance of actually getting this fixed.